Kick it in the guts, Barry.
Known by different names, the Interceptor, the Black on Black, the Last of the V8s and the Pursuit Special, the 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT from the original Mad Max would go on to become as famous as its star itself among car enthusiasts after it was first introduced to the film world in April of 1979.
Tough enough to get through when you have to get through. Come hell or high water. New Falcon hardtop. With a choice of powerful 6s or high-performance V8s. New Falcon hardtop. The bold one of the Falcon breed. Another of the new frontiers from Ford.
The brainchild of director George Miller and producer Byron Kennedy's vision of what they imagined the car of the film's protagonist Mad Max Rockatansky would drive, The Last of the V8s became one of the definitive images affiliated with the franchise itself and has become a fan favourite of collectors, car and movie enthusiasts alike. In 1971, with the rise in popularity in Australian muscle car tour racing due to the success of tracks such as Bathurst and Sandown, Ford Australia decided to produce a newly refined version of its two-door hardtop series that had been retired since 1966 with the XP model and would go on to introduce the more sleek and streamlined Ford Falcon XA. Taking design notes from the American muscle cars of the time, such as the Mustang Fastback and other US hardtops available, the new Ford Falcon brought along a styling of aerodynamic curves that was fondly referred to as the Coke bottler era, in contrast to its predecessor's more square appearance. The new Ford design had racing in mind when the XA first rolled off the assembly line in early of 1972, followed by the facelifted XB in late 1973, and finally the XC, which ended the hardtop era when the last model was rolled off the line in March of 1979. With a low budget of just under 400,000 Australian dollars, 20,000 of which was to be spent on obtaining the vehicles needed, the producers of Mad Max, which had originally wanted the hero car of the film to be an American Mustang Fastback, opted instead to use the locally built Falcon, as it was advised that the local bred Ford muscle cars would make for a better option due to a much easier availability of parts needed for maintenance during production. It was at this point that the producers chose and acquired the then white 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT hardtop from Rural Motors Orange and began modifications soon after to turn the white XB into the black pursuit car it was later to become. Taking cues and influences of modification styles of the time, not least of which one of the Black on Black's most recognisable feature, a Monza front end developed by Peter Caterpane that had first gained attention in the 1977 Melbourne Motor Show and would later be given to and used by Ray Beckerley to transform the XB at the now defunct Melbourne modification specialist company RAF X, according to producer Byron Kennedy's specifications, into the car he had envisioned.
Byron was very influential on the Black on Black car. I mean, that was something that he just really put a lot of work into. And then I remember he drove up in it with that big throttling rumble engine, and I saw it, I think he had the blower, it kind of the whole engine, the blower, but it wasn't yet spinning. I remember thinking, oh wow, that's fantastic.
They come down in that magnificent view from the 7 helicopter, a scene we've never seen before, side by side.
Equipped with a 351 cubic inch 5.8 litre V8 Cleveland engine, the early model XB GT purchase was one of the last high-performance Fords to arrive on the scene before later models of the car were hindered in output due to the growing emission concerns by the Australian government and the supercar scare of the early 1970s. With the mid-300 horsepower output range, the XB GT hardtop was already an established performance and style vehicle of its time, but the producers wanted to add more menace to the XB to match the film's dark tone. The decision was made to add a Wien supercharger with a Scott injector hat to give the soon-to-be Pursuit Special a much darker look to meet this tone. The supercharger had been borrowed for use from a high-performance racing group team, taken from a top fuel dragster, and was hollowed out as director George Miller wanted the black-on-black to have the ability to be able to be switched on and off like a type of wild animal, as he put it, to be released at the push of a button. With cast, vehicles, and crew now in place, production of Mad Max was soon underway. With only a tiny budget and one car at their disposal that was not only used as the main vehicle of choice for the film's climax, the black-on-black was also functional as personal transport for the production crew in order to pick up and drop off equipment and cast to and from location when needed. For the stunts to be filmed on screen that needed the Pursuit Special to be driven at high speeds, however, race and stunt car driver Phil Brock, brother of legendary race driver Peter Brock, was brought on board to perform some of the most memorable adrenaline-fueled moments of the film that showed the XB reach speeds of up to and over 100 miles per hour.
Those Falcons of that era had some very good muscular appeal to them, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it looked pretty fast, you stand still. It looked mean, wasn't it? So it's a matter of going, hey, you go flat out type thing and I'll try to stick with it. Because again, it's a bit like an intimidation thing.
Mad Max. A crack interceptor on the highways of tomorrow. Into a world without law comes a man without fear. Mad Max.
Mad Max exploded onto the scene and came out to mixed reviews and debates of violence that had labelled the film as a typical exploitation piece of the time. One thing that was touched and agreed upon, however, was the action was fast-paced and adrenaline-fueled, and the vehicle action was some of the best ever caught on film and rivaled anything that had come out of Hollywood up to that point, and the film would go on to break world box office records as one of the highest profit films ever produced.
When we did Mad Max, we realised that we had to fulfil fantasies of a large cross-section of the audience to a degree that would satisfy us if we were sitting there watching our own program and paying $5 to do so. We made something that we really wanted to see.
With Mad Max in release and circulating to box office success worldwide, the car would be toured to promote the film and was no longer needed, and with the supercharger returned and its side exhaust pipes removed, the Pursuit Special was given to mechanic Murray Smith as a form of compensation for his mechanical work due to the producer's inability to pay for his service in full, and was soon put up for sale as it was no longer needed and its value as a daily driver was not in the realm of cost efficiency. However, this proved to be a pointless effort, as by that stage the car was not an easy sell and was left to sit and wait, as nobody wanted to buy a used green car at the time. With the huge success of the original film, a sequel was commissioned and greenlit to be produced. The black on black was needed once more, only this time it would undergo another series of modifications. With the story now set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, the XB was to be altered to match the new environment setting. Gone was the lower half of the Monza front end, and the addition of 2 large tanks were added at the rear to help illustrate the now need to scavenge for fuel, as the Pursuit Special would be transformed into a rugged, beaten-up version of the sleek beauty it once was. Unlike the first film, the wind blower and Scott hat were not obtained, and a new supercharger system was needed and created to be put in its place. With a higher budget than the first Mad Max, the producers were able to acquire a second V8 for use in the film. Originally a yellow 1974 Ford Falcon GS XB, this new car would serve 2 main purposes in the film. While the original black on black was mostly used for close-ups and interior shots, the second V8 would be used as a stand-in for the wide shot and terrain driving scenes, and finally to be used for what would be the climactic end to the Pursuit Special, as the car was rolled off the road and later exploded into a fiery ball, leaving nothing more but charred remains and twisted metal of a once automotive work of art. Those remains would be hauled away and still reside in Broken Hill, despite no longer being available to be seen by the public, as parts of the remains had been stolen over time. The burnout car is now in the hands of a private owner and stored away from view. This was for the most part the last we would see of the black on black, as it would be another 30 years before it would make a return appearance to the big screen. Once again, the producers had another hit on their hands, as Mad Max 2 came out to higher praise and more world recognition than its predecessor. It would become a global hit and remembered fondly by many movie enthusiasts as one of the greatest action films to ever exist, no less due to its spectacular car chases and stunts. When production of Mad Max 2 came to an end, so too did most of the cars used in the film, as they were sent off to the local scrap yards to be demolished, as they had served their purpose and were no longer needed. In 1985, another sequel was produced, this time to be called Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It was released to mixed reviews, which saw the film lacking in the car action the series had become famous for. The vehicles in this film bore little resemblance to the types of street machines used in past entries, leaving a number of fans dissatisfied and considering this to be the weakest entry into the Mad Max franchise. With the Mad Max trilogy now over, the XB had become an almost forgotten memory. However, as fate would have it, the scrap collector who had received the Pursuit Special was reluctant to destroy it, and gave it to colleague Ray Evans from Adelaide, who kept the XB outside his yard for a number of years until it was spotted by Bob Fosenko, who purchased the black on black and became its new owner. A restoration with the help of Franklin-side crash restorers Tony and Mario Romeo was soon underway to bring the Mad Max car back to its former glory, with the help and information supplied by the car's previous builder and owner, Murray Smith, who was vital in identifying the black on black as the original vehicle that was used in the films. With the restoration cost of around $20,000, the XB still retained some of its more Mad Max 2 qualities. Most notably, the 2 rear fuel tanks fitted during the sequel's production. And now, with a new altered Monza front end, the Pursuit Special was soon to be put on display across Australia once more for public viewing. After 10 years of touring it past, the car was loaned to the National Motor Museum in South Australia until 1993, when it was eventually bought by English car collector Peter Nelson, who transported the black on black to the UK and kept it on display at the Cars of the Stars Motor Museum, where it would stay for the next 2 decades. 30 years would pass since the last installment into the Mad Max series was released, the trilogy of films all but forgotten outside of movie fans and car enthusiasts. But in 2015, fans got to see once more on the big screen the V8 and its supercharger roar into action in George Miller's masterpiece, Mad Max Fury Road.
The V8 Interceptor stayed with Max for 3 of the movies, and in the old westerns, each cowboy had his favourite horse. I think Roy Rogers had Trigger. Well, I think Max has his Interceptor.
Bearing a similar resemblance to its appearance in Mad Max 2, this replacement Interceptor was now being introduced to a new generation of moviegoers who some had never seen the XB on screen and in action before. Keeping with the tone of the scavenger version of Max from The Road Warrior, this new black on black had its mix of styling from the first 2 films. With the new blower and Scott injector hat, the Interceptor retained part of its Monza front end and at least one of its rear tanks. With only a brief appearance in the film as it appeared in the beginning, the black on black was once more going to be the victim of a magnificent destruction. Driven by Guy Norris, who had worked previously as a stuntman in Mad Max 2 and had been involved in one of the most spectacular and failed stunts of that film, Guy was now given the role of stunt coordinator for Fury Road and took up the task of driving the Interceptor into its demise.
I was involved in sort of the testing process of it, so I really thought, well, you know, I'd like to do it. And it was one of those ones that had a whole combination of aspects. It was very precise camera placement of where we wanted the car to actually end up. So it was really something that I felt, more comfortable doing myself.
However, this would not be the last appearance of this new XB in the film, as it was resurrected into a more modified than ever before version of itself, and would later be referred to as the Razor Cola. No longer coated in a 2-tone black paint scheme, this new version of the Interceptor was given a much meaner look and off-road appeal to match the much harsher tone and terrain of the film's setting. Retaining its Scott hat with the addition of an extra supercharger mounted on top of the other, the XB without a doubt looked the most menacing it had ever been. Like its predecessors, however, the Razor Collar would also meet its end in spectacular fashion and become another casualty of the many Mad Max car crashes the franchise had become famous for. With the future of Mad Max now in uncertainty, so too is the prospect of seeing the Pursuit special on the big screen ever again, as for the time being its fate and that of the franchise is left to be discovered. Returning back into mainstream popularity once more, the XB GT Pursuit Special and its influence has made a number of appearances over the years in mainstream media since it first drove onto the big screen in 1979. Appearing in music videos, commercials, video games, model kits and diecasts, cartoons,
buckle up, mate!
And even making movie cameos in other recent box office hits such as Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One. As for the car itself, the Ford Falcon XB GT hardtop has gone on to become a collector's item in Australia and across the globe, and has been replicated by fans and car enthusiasts to appear as the black on black, reaching parts of the world from the US to the UK and even Japan. However, only one true car retains the title of original. No longer to be found in the UK, the Pursuit Special was sold to and bought by Michael Deza in 2011 and transported to the US, and now features in the Miami Auto Museum Desert Collection, soon to be relocated to Orlando. No longer used or driven as a pursuit of crazed bandits, this 2-time movie classic car now rests in storage and remains this way for fans to see her. Known by different names, the Interceptor, the Black on Black, the last of the V8s and the Pursuit Special, the 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT hardtop remains as a piece of car and cinema history that has earned its place among fans, and as a tribute to the determination of 2 young men in Australia in the 1970s who wanted to see their vision of a character and his world come to life on the big screen in the roar of an engine.